Hello friends, welcome to Unsarkari. And like the previous 7 lectures that we have done, now we are taking up understanding up to little more complex concepts in environment. I would again urge you to first go through and revise once more all the key concepts, the notes that you have made along with your understanding. And I'm very sure the examples that you have written, they are going to help you to revise very quickly. One more thing, this lecture and the previous lectures, they will help you to go through the magazines and the market notes which are available on different websites to go through very quickly, and you can take out analytical and important ideas from them. Coming to the topic of the day, it is ecosystem. You have to understand ecosystem, structure and function. So any ecological unit that includes all the organisms, that is communities given in a given area, which interact among themselves and with the physical environment, so that a flow of energy is leading to a clearly defined trophic structure, biotic diversity and material cycle. These three keywords are very important. I repeat them: trophic structure, biotic diversity and material cycle, which means exchange of materials within the system. It is known as ecological system or ecosystem. That means ecosystem or ecological system is a kind of a complex interaction which involves both physical environment and biotic environment, that is both abiotic and biotic factors. So there exist nutritional relationships, that means food links amongst the living organisms of such a system. And when we think that what can be an ecological unit, so earth is considered as a classical example or a giant ecosystem unit where abiotic and biotic factors are constantly acting and reacting upon each other, thereby bringing forth both structural and functional changes. Now this vast ecosystem, that is biosphere, is very difficult to handle. Therefore, in order to understand it, in order to relate it, in order to study it, we are making artificial subdivisions into units of smaller ecosystems. That's why we say terrestrial ecosystem, aquatic ecosystem, or even man-made ecosystem. Within terrestrial ecosystem, forest, desert and grassland. Within aquatic ecosystem, you have freshwater, marine, and so on. And within man-made, you have cropland and other kind of examples. So ecosystem may be as large as earth and maybe as small as a single log, a pond, a cropland, ocean, desert, forest, and so on. These unit ecosystems are separated from each other by time and space, but functionally they all are linked with each other, therefore they are forming an integrated whole. So ecosystems are not existing in silos, they are not existing in tight compartments, they are existing in integration with each other. So you see there is a diagrammatic representation of the basic types of ecosystem, all of which together constitutes giant ecosystem or biosphere. So you see climate regime, that is you have forest, grassland, desert, man engineered, then you have decomposers, you have producers, and sun is obviously a very important factor. You have nutrient fuel, fresh water, marine, and aquatic ecosystem. They are obviously part of fresh and marine are part of aquatic ecosystem, and you have consumers also. So there is a constant churning of producers, consumers, decomposers, and so on. But what can be the kinds of ecosystem? As we already said, it can be natural, it can be artificial, temporary, permanent, large, or tiny. In natural ecosystems, one thing is very sure: they are operating by themselves without any major interference by men. So, based upon this understanding, a particular kind of habitat are created. For example, terrestrial ecosystem, forest, grasslands, deserts, a single log, and so on. Aquatic ecosystem, freshwater ecosystem, that is lotic, running water as spring, brook, stream, or river. Lentic, standing water, lake, pond, pool, puddle, ditch, swamp, and so on. So both the examples we might have seen in our neighborhoods or in the villages or even some movies, and you can just relate. Marine ecosystems will be including saltwater bodies, which may be deep bodies as an ocean, or shallow ones as sea or estuary. So terrestrial, then you have aquatic, within aquatic you have freshwater, and you have marine ecosystems. In artificial ecosystems, as we already said, it is man-made or man-engineered. They are maintained artificially by men, where it is putting up energy, it is planning it, it is manipulating it, and natural balance is disturbed. So croplands, sugarcane, wheat, rice fields, orchards, gardens, villages, dams, aquarium, manned spaceship, and even when we speak in today's time, urban planned cities, when we say, and we say that you have all the semblance of a great forest or a great environment over there, or when we speak about the Goa and beaches, where we are creating other kind of infrastructure, and we are saying that we have completely controlled it, and we are creating an ecosystem. The structure of an ecosystem is basically a description of species of the organisms that are present there, including their life histories, population, distribution in space. So it is a guide who is who in the ecosystem. So descriptive information on the non-living, that is physical features, amount and distribution of nutrients is very, very crucial to understand the structure. So what kind of components can we say there are in ecosystem? There are two major components. Abiotic, as we already said, abiotic or non-living components. So climatic conditions and physical factors. So temperature, light, the duration and the intensity of light, moisture, relative humidity, pH, air, soil, and water. Inorganic substances such as water, carbon, nitrogen, sulfur, phosphorus, and so on, they all are involved in the cycling of materials in the ecosystem. And when the cycling comes into picture, these are called biogeochemical cycles. We will discuss about them. And the amount of these inorganic substances present at any time in an ecosystem, they are designated as standing state or standing quality. Now, organic substances, protein, carbohydrates, lipids, human substances, they are also present in the biomass. So they are forming biochemical structure that are linking both biotic and abiotic components of ecosystem. So UPSC in the prelims examination, they are actually asking us very small, very tiny components, very basic components, and they are trying to test our knowledge whether we understand it is abiotic, it is biotic, or for further, the classification can be there. Biotic or living components, in the trophic structure of any ecosystem, living organisms are distinguished based on their nutritional relationships. How much are they self-dependent? How much are they dependent on others? So autotrophic components, auto means self, tro means nourishing component. So it includes producers or energy transducers which convert solar energy into chemical energy that becomes locked in complex organic substances such as carbohydrate, lipid, and protein with the help of simple inorganic substances such as water and carbon dioxide. And organic substances, as already discussed, such as enzymes, these are forming autotrophic components. So autotrophic, again I am saying, they are producers, they are energy transducers, they are converting solar energy into chemical energy. We will discuss it further why it is called chemical energy. And this is called chemical energy as already discussed because they are locked in complex organic substances. Photoautotrophs, green photosynthetic pigment chlorophyll to transduct the solar or light energy of sun, trees, grasses, algae, and the tiny phytoplanktons. UPSC asks questions on this. And photosynthetic bacteria and cyanobacteria, that is blue-green algae, forms part of it. Chemoautotrophs, which use energy generated in oxidation or reduction processes, that they are kind of a chemical reactions, but their significance in the ecosystem as producers is less. So microorganisms such as Begiotoa, sulfur bacteria, they are forming the part of chemioautotrophs. So they are also important, but not as the the previous one. Heterotrophic components, hetero means other, and again trophic means nourishing organisms. They are the one who are predominating the activities of utilization, rearrangement, and the decomposition of complex organic materials. That's how we have to see. They are called consumers also. That means consumers are utilizing, consumers are rearranging, consumers are decomposing complex organic materials because they are consuming the matter which is built up by the autotrophs or producers. The consumers are of the mainly two types. Macro consumers, they are called phagotrophs. Phago means to eat, and it is including animals which ingest other organisms or chunks of organic matter. Depending upon their food habits, consumer may be either herbivorous, that is plant eaters, carnivorous, that may be flesh eaters. Herbivorous live on living plants, and that is why they are also known as primary consumers. Insects, zooplanktons, and animals such as deer, cattle, elephant, etc. Secondary and tertiary consumers, if they are present in the food chain of the ecosystem, they are carnivores or omnivores. For examples, insect such as praying mantis, dragonflies, spiders, and large animals such as tiger, lion, leopard, and wolf. So, secondary consumers are the carnivores which are feeding on the primary consumers or herbivores. And carnivores are often recognized as carnivore order 1, carnivore order 2, depending upon their food habits. Ticks, mites, leeches, and blood-sucking insects such as mosquito and bedbugs, they are dependent upon herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores. Now let's come to microconsumers. So these are decomposers, reducers, saprotrophs. Sapro means to decompose. Osmotrophs, that means to pass through a membrane, and scavengers. There are three types. So Weigert and Owen, they coined the term biophages. Biophages means heterotrophic consumers, which are feeding upon the dead organic matter. Microconsumers include microorganisms such as bacteria, actinomycetes, and fungi. Microconsumers, what they are doing, they are breaking down the complex organic compound of dead or living protoplasm. They are absorbing some of the decomposition or breakdown products and release inorganic nutrients in the environment, making them available again to autotrophs and producers. So as we already said, it is a kind of a cyclical process. Some invertebrates, animals such as protozoa, oligochaeta, such as earthworms, they use the dead organic matter for their food. They have essential enzymes and therefore they can be classified as decomposers organisms. Some ecologists also believe that microorganisms are the primary decomposers, whereas invertebrates are secondary decomposers. So this is all just about the classification so that we can understand how actually environment is functioning. Let's see example. A pond as a whole is an example of an aquatic and freshwater ecosystem. It is representing a self-sufficient and self-regulating system. We agree with that. Biotic component producers, so photoautotropic green plants and photosynthetic bacteria, they are producers. They fix radiant energy of sun with the help of minerals derived from water and mud. They manufacture complex organic substances such as carbohydrates, protein, and lipids. And these producers are of maybe following types: macrophytes, that means rooted large size plants, which are comprising three types of hydrophytes. So these rooted large plants may be partially or completely submerged. They may be floating also, and they may be emergent also. There are so many examples: Trapa, Typha, Iliocaris, Sagittaria, and so on. We need not to remember the names, just you have to understand that yes, certain thing is existing and the classification is there. Besides, some are floating forms, they are occurring in the pond ecosystem. Now, what are the second type? Phytoplanktons. Microscopic, very minute, floating or suspended lower plant algae. They are distributed throughout the water, but mainly in the photic zone where the light is there. Most of them are filamentous algae such as Spirogyra, Ulothrix, Cladophora, and Oidognium. They are also occurring, for example, Chlorella, Clostridium, and so on. There are so many examples, Volvox, diatoms, and examination is only going to give you very popular one and the very famous one. It is not going to get into much technicalities, but without understanding what phytoplanktons are and what are their function, you cannot really appreciate the whole environment and obviously the whole concept of the ecosystem. Macro consumers, we have discussed micro. Macro, they are the phagotrophic heterotrophs which depend for their nutrition on the organic food manufactured by producers. So the green plants. And if we divide it further, types, if we see the herbivorous, primary consumers, these animals feed directly on living plants. Living plants means producers or the plant remains. They may be large or minute in size. Benthos. So what are benthos? Bottom dwelling forms such as fish, insect larvae, beetles, mites, mollusks. Zooplanktons, which are chiefly feeding upon phytoplanktons and are chiefly the rotifers. They are the one which are actually playing a very important role. Crustaceans. They are also present in the pond. So these small sized herbivores and some mammals such as buffaloes, cow, because they are also visiting the pond casually and feeding on the marginal rooted macrophytes. Some birds are also regularly visiting the pond and they are also feeding upon hydrophytes. So what is very important for us to understand when we write it on the paper sheet, that when we divide it and when we further classify it, we are able to understand it very clearly that actually the whole thing is happening between some important divisions. Carnivore order 1, there are secondary consumers. These are feeding on the herbivores and these are including chiefly insects, amphibians, for example frogs. Most insects are water beetles, they are feeding upon zooplankton. Some insects are the names of dragonflies, they are feeding upon aquatic insects. So you have to just logically think. When we speak about tertiary consumers, they are large fish that are feeding upon smaller fish and therefore you can tell them the tertiary consumers. Now here it is what we have discussed till now. So you have the humus, then you have profoundal, then you have turtle, you have tertiary consumers like fish we were saying, you have the primary consumers, you have the secondary consumers, then you have the producers. These are the biotic factors, producers, algae. Then you have consumers. In that we have divided into primary, secondary and tertiary. In secondary we have insects and larvae. In tertiary we have fishes and sharks. We have talked about decomposers like bacteria, fungi and microbes. We have talked about abiotic factors like light, water, heat and minerals. So you can also create a small chart like this and I'm sure your all concepts will be very much clear. Again, another example. See, you have again example of water beetle, what it is happening, tadpole, lava, mosquito, nymph, yellow butterfly. We have spoken about the submerged plant, the floating ones, and this is just to make sure that you understand and you can take up some classical examples from the Indian landscape also. This is again another example. You can just appreciate your whole understanding, just have a look at it, try to recall, try to see, and then just move on by enjoying the whole concept. Now let's see decomposers. As we already said, they are micro consumers since they absorb only a fraction of the decomposed matter. That is why they are called micro consumers. They are bringing about the decomposition of the dead organic matter of both producers as well as micro consumers to simpler form, because they are dividing it into simpler forms. That's what we are saying. So decomposers are helping in the returning of mineral elements again to the medium of pond and running biogeochemical cycle. That means whole thing is just returning back to the nature. Decomposers of pond ecosystem are chiefly bacteria, actinomycetes, fungi. Among fungi, you have Aspergillus, you have Cladosporium, you have Rhizopus penicillium, you have Alternaria, you have Trichodermus, and so on. That means when we speak about stability and when we speak about the continuation of any kind of system, we say that the whole thing must remain in the same way and there must not be any issues with the ecosystem. That is why we always appreciate and we say the environment must remain in the same way. The dead organic matter is decomposed into simple form by microorganisms. We have just confirmed that. Functions of an ecosystem. When we consider the function of an ecosystem, we must describe the flow of energy and the cycling of nutrients. Two keywords are there, flow and the cycling. That is, we are interested in things like how much sunlight is trapped by plants in a year, how much plant material is eaten by herbivores, how many herbivores are eaten by carnivores. Thus, the producers, the green plant, they fix the radiant energy with the help of minerals. We already said carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, calcium, magnesium, zinc, iron, and so on, taken from their edaphic, that is soil, or it may be aerial environment, that is nutrient pool. They are building up complex organic matter, that is carbohydrates, fat, proteins and nucleic acids. Some ecologists are preferring to refer the green plants as converters or even transducers. That with the term we already used, because yes, in their view the most popular and the prevalent term producer from the energy perspective is actually misleading. That is why they are calling them converter, because as we already say and we are discussing that we are converting one form into another. Their viewpoint is that green plants are producing carbohydrates, that also we seen. They are not producing energy and they are converting or transducing radiant energy into chemicals, so they must be called as converters or transducers. Why they are called as producers? The two ecological processes of energy flow and the mineral cycling, they are involving interaction between the physico-chemical environment and the biotic communities. That is why they may be considered as the heart of ecosystem dynamics. So in an ecosystem, energy flows in a non-cyclic manner, that is unidirectional manner, from sun to the decomposers via producers and macro consumers, and herbivores and carnivores. Obviously, they are part of the macro consumers, whereas the minerals keep on moving in a cyclic manner. So what we are saying, that the things are not static, things are not in fact new. What we have to make sure, we have to understand that they started from point 1 and they are reaching at point 2 and again reaching back to point 1. Productivity of the ecosystem, let's understand that. That means rate of production. Productivity is linked with rate of production, the amount of organic matter accumulated in any unit of time. So, primary productivity, rate at which radiant energy is stored by photosynthetic and chemosynthetic activity of producers. Primary activity is also divided into gross primary productivity, refers to the total rate of photosynthesis, including organic matter used in respiration during the measurement period, and this GPP or the gross primary productivity depends upon chlorophyll content. Now what is net primary productivity? Rate of storage of organic matter in the plant tissues in excess, okay, in excess of respiratory utilization by plants during the measurement periods. That means you have to just exclude the energy part which is actually used for respiration. Secondary productivity, it is the rate of energy storage at consumers level, herbivores and decomposers. That is called secondary productivity. Consumers tend to utilize already produced food materials in their respiration. They are converting the food matter to different tissues. So the secondary productivity is not divided into gross and net amounts. That is why the ecologists such as Autumn, they are using the term assimilation and they are not using the term production at this level. That means the consumer's level. Secondary productivity remains mobile because it is going from one organism to the another and does not live in situ like the primary productivity. In the primary productivity we have plants. We know that it is actually static in that sense, it is in situ, but same is not the case with the secondary productivity. So the net productivity, what it is known as the rate of storage of organic matter not used by heterotrophs or consumers. That means equivalent to the net primary production minus consumption by heterotrophs during the unit period. Unit period may be season or maybe year or whatever we can divide because it is not natural. It is the unit period is only for our own understanding. So you see, that's how it is. Energy flows in as sunlight and it is getting out as heat. So sun to the plants, to the herbivores, to the carnivores, and then you have the decomposers everywhere. Everyone is playing their own function and role. Now, very important, a number of questions have been asked. Food chains in the ecosystem. One can observe transfer or flow of energy from one trophic level to the another. We have discussed that. And what is trophic level? Number as the number of links by which it is separated from the producer, or the nth position of the organism in the food chain is called trophic level. There are different levels. The pattern of eating and being eaten is forming a linear chain that is called food chain. Okay, the pattern of eating and being eaten. And from where it starts? It starts with the producer. So primary producer is trapping radiant energy of sun and transferring that chemical or potential energy of organic compounds such as carbohydrates, protein and fats. So how we can understand this is when an herbivorous animal it is eating a plant or when a bacteria is decomposing it, these organic compounds are oxidized. Energy is liberated and it is the equal amount of energy used in synthesizing the substances. That means it is following the first law of thermodynamics. We will also see what is first law of thermodynamics. But some of the energy is heat and not useful energy. Now that is called second law of thermodynamics. We will also discuss that. You just have to understand that how it is functioning. There is oxidation, there is release and liberation of energy, and all the energy is not utilized efficiently. If this animal, where we have discussed just that, is eaten by the another one, now there is transfer of energy from herbivore to carnivore. It is further decreasing useful energy because the second animal or the carnivores, it is oxidizing the organic substances of the first, that is herbivore, and then it is liberating energy to synthesize its own cellular constituents because it has to also survive, Such transfer of energy from organism to organism is sustaining the ecosystem. There is both transfer of energy, there is both release of energy, and there is both waste of energy. So when the energy is transferred from individual to individual in a particular community, like in a pond or lake, in a river, we are coming across the food chains. So the number of steps in a food chain are always restricted to 4 or 5, and the energy available is decreasing with each step. For example, in a typical food chain of an Indian river, a diatom may be eaten by a copepod, which is eaten by a small fish, which forms the food source of the large fish, and so on. So you see, there is a channel, there is a whole process going on, and there is a structured way and method by which energy will be decreasing as we are moving towards the top levels. So you see, very important from the PT example perspective, phytoplanktons, zooplanktons, small fish, large fish, men. That is how in the Indian pasture the following food chain is operating. Similarly, you have grass species, grasshopper, a toad, a rat snake, and finally you have hawk. So these are two examples that we have taken. Again, to make you understand, it is producer to primary consumer like grasshopper, secondary consumers like pigeon, then you have tertiary consumers like snake, you have apex predator like hawk, and then finally you have decomposer, and then again going to producers. So in a simple food chain of 1,000 calories of energy reaching a plant, only 10 calories, that is 1%, are stored by the plant. Remaining 99% are lost to the environment or for the plant's own maintenance. Of the 10 calories which are available to the herbivore, 9 calories, that is 99%, are lost at its level, and only 1 calorie is passed down to carnivore. Therefore, we can conclude that at each trophic level in the food chain, a large portion of energy is used for its own maintenance and ultimately lost as a heat. Consequently, organisms in each trophic level passes on less and less energy than they receive. This tends to limit the number of steps to the trophic levels of 4 or 5. As we already said, the longer is the food chain, the less is the energy available to the final member. So what we are seeing, the sun, as we are seeing, 1,000 calories, 990 lost to the environment, autotrophs, 10 calories plant matter available as a food, 9 calories lost to environment, and finally you have 1 calorie of as available as a food, and only you can say at the top level is carnivore. So in nature, basically two types of food chains are recognized: grazing food chain and detritus food chain. So grading food chain is a type of food chain which starts from the living green plants, goes to grazing herbivores, and then they go on to carnivores. Ecosystem with such type of food chains are directly dependent on an influx of solar radiation. Thus, this type of food chain depends on autotrophic energy capture, and the movement of this energy is to herbivores. Most of the ecosystem in nature is following this type of food chain. These chains are very significant from the energy standpoint. So phytoplankton, zooplankton that we have just discussed recently, fish sequence or the grasses, rabbit, fox sequence are the examples of grazing food chain. The further the producer herbivore carnivore chain is predator chain. And parasitic chains is also existing wherein smaller organisms are consuming the larger ones without outright killing, as is the case with predators. So the grazing food chain is also having a little bit of complexity as we have just discussed. When it comes to detritus food chain, organic wastes, exudates, dead matter, large organic matter is derived from the grazing food chains, and this is called detritus. The energy contained in this detritus is not lost to the ecosystem as a whole. Rather, it is serving as a source of food, source of energy to other group of organisms. They are called detritivores that are separate from grazing food chain and are generally termed as detritus food chain. So detritus food chain represents an exceedingly important component in the energy flow of an ecosystem. In some ecosystems, considerably more energy flows through the detritus food chain than it is flowing through the grazing food chain that we discussed. In the detritus food chain, the energy flow remains continuous passage. But in case of, you know, uh, like we have discussed previously, here it is a continuous, in case of detritus, it is continuous passage rather than a stepwise flow between the discrete entities, like we have discussed in case of grazing food chain. So this is grazing food chain versus detritus food chain. Primary, Consumer is coming after producers, then you have secondary consumers, you have tertiary consumers, and you have decomposers. But let's see, in case of detritus, what is happening? Dead leaves is eaten by woodhouse, and then woodlouse is eaten by the blackbird. Now again, this is very important diagrammatic representation of detritus food chain. Decomposer organisms are there. Organic material permanently incorporate into sediments and rocks, that we agree. Similarly, over here you have soil animals which consume other living soil organisms, and then soil organisms consumed by carnivores in the grazing food chain. This is the grazing food chain which is happening, and the dead and excretory material from the grazing food chain. We discussed first this, and then we discussed this one, detritus. So from the grazing one, we are getting a lot of biomass, we are getting a lot of dead and excretory material, we are talking about the role of decomposers, and then we are again bringing the chain back. So detritus food chain, dead leaves eaten by woodlouse as we discussed, and in detritus you have primary detritus feeder, you have secondary detritus feeder. So the organisms of detritus food chain are many, and they include algae, bacteria, slime molds, actinomycetes, fungi, protozoa, insects, mites, crustacea, centipedes, mollusks, rotifers, annelids, so much, worms, nematodes, and even some vertebrates. Some species are highly specific in their food requirements, and they can almost eat anything. Many protozoa, they are requiring specific organic acids and vitamins and other nutrients before they can thrive. On the other hand, the guts of small columbula, a group of tiny soil insects are called columbula, they have been reported to contain decaying plant material, fungal fragments, spores, fly pupae, and parts of decaying earthworms, cuticle, and even from their own fecal casting, like the Hale discussed. In contrast to the grazing food chain, in which energy is stored entirely within the tissues of the living organisms, energy storage in the detritus food chain may be largely external to the organisms. This is very, very important to understand. And that is how UPSC can really fox you with mixing the concept of the grazing food chain with that of the detritus food chain. But it is very simple. In case of detritus, it is a continuous and a more complex process, and whereas in case of grazing food chain, you have the settled pattern and the method, and they are different entities. Food web. In nature, simple food chains are occurring rarely. They are only conceptual thing. The same organism may operate in the ecosystem at more than one trophic level. This is also UPSC question. It may derive its food from more than one source. Even the same organism may be eaten by several organisms. We also agree of a higher trophic level, or organism may feed upon the several different organisms of a lower trophic level. We all agree with this. Usually the kind of food changes with the age of organism and the food availability. Thus, in a given ecosystem, various food chains are linked together and intersect with each other, and they are forming a complex network is called food web. In any complex food web, one can recognize several different trophic levels. So you see, green plants, first trophic level, herbivores, second trophic level, carnivores, insectivores, third trophic level, higher carnivores, fourth trophic level, and insect hyperparasites. A classification of organisms by the trophic level is one function and not of the species as such. A given species may occupy more than trophic level. That means this is a kind of a multi-dimensional process. The complexity of food web can vary greatly, and we discuss this complexity by a measure called connectance of the food web. So food web is an interchanging. It is a kind of a very complex and multi-interacting process, unlike the food chain. Connectance, actual number of interspecific interactions upon potential number of interspecific interactions. Just remember this, that there is a concept called connectance. Now, when we speak about the generalizations about food web, when we say food webs are not too complex, why? Because more and more species are involved in a food web, the connection falls. Except in insect communities, omnivores are scarce. We know that. When they occur, they usually feed upon species in the adjacent trophic levels. We also agree with that. Within habitats, food webs are rarely broken up into discrete compartments. The number of species of predators in the food web typically exceeds the number of species of prey by an average of 1 is to 3. That is predator species per prey species. When we discussed about community, remember, already we discussed that this is possibility. We also discussed about the biotic, and we were discussing about the abiotic factors. Then now we can now appreciate the fact that how the environment and the ecosystem is created, because otherwise it will collapse. So food web showing 1 to 6 trophic levels, that is 1 is plant, 2 grasshopper, mouse and bear, 3 praying mantis, frog, owl and bear, 4th is owl, shrew and bear, 5th is owl and bear, and 6th is marten. Even if you see the UPSC questions previously, they have already directly asked the questions on food web and on food chain. So you see, this is how the food web is. Have a clear and a smart look, and you can always get back for the questions. Now let's see another very important concept, because in the successive steps of the grazing food chain, photosynthetic autotroph, herbivores, heterotroph, carnivores, heterotrophs, decay bacteria, the number and mass of organisms in each step is limited by the amount of energy available, as we already discussed. Since some energy is lost as heat, in each transformation, that means from photosynthetic autotroph to herbivores to carnivores to decay bacteria, the transformation is becoming progressively smaller. The steps are becoming smaller. Heat is becoming less. And near the top, the relationship is actually coming something like an ecological pyramid. Now, in aquatic ecosystems, the lakes and open sea, the primary production is concentrated in the microscopic algae. Now, these algae have short cycle, they are multiplying very rapidly. They are accumulating little organic matter and are heavily exploited by herbivorous zooplankton, and we have discussed this in our previous lecture also. And at any one point of time, the standing crop is low. Okay. As a result, the pyramid of biomass for these aquatic ecosystem is inverted, something like this. The base is very much smaller than the structure it supports, but it has to continuously produce material, otherwise it will collapse. So the types of ecological pyramids we see, you can understand it better. So pyramid of number, the number of individual organisms at different trophic levels of food chain. So this pyramid, as advanced by Charles Hilton, who pointed out the great difference in the number of the organisms evolved in each steps of the food chain. He said that in each level, the number of animals will be different. For example, the animal at the lower end of the chain are the most abundant. Successive links of carnivores are decreasing rapidly in the number and until things are very few at the top level. So the pyramid of number ignores the biomass of organisms. Remember this, okay? It is ignoring the biomass because it is based on numbers. It is also not indicating energy transferred or the use of energy by the groups involved. So the lake ecosystem provides a typical example of pyramid of number. Then let's see pyramid of biomass. The biomass of members of the food chain present at any time forms the pyramid of biomass. You know, what, because it is depending on biomass. The pyramid of biomass, it is indicating decrease in biomass in each tropical level from the base to top. That means biomass is also decreasing when we are going from 0 to 1. Now let's see production, pyramid of energy. When production is considered in terms of energy, the pyramid is indicating not only the amount of energy flow at each level, but more importantly the actual level of various organisms, they what the role they are playing in the transfer of energy. The base upon which pyramid of energy is constructed is the quality of organisms per produced per unit of time. I again repeat, the base upon which pyramid of energy is constructed is the quantity of organisms produced per unit of time, the rate at which food material passes through the food chain. Some organisms may have small biomass, but the total energy they assimilate and pass on, it may be greater than that of organisms with a much larger biomass. Okay, this is very little complex to understand, but if you go it slowly, you will be able to understand the rate at which food material passes through the food chain is very important, because some animals may have a small biomass, but the total energy they assimilate and they pass on may be considerably greater than that of the organisms with a much larger biomass, because here we are talking not about the biomass, here we are talking about the amount of energy. So energy here we are seeing which is very much disassociated with biomass. Energy pyramids are always sloping because less energy is transferred from each level than was paid into it. जितना मिला था आप उससे कम ही कर पाएंगे. In cases such as in case of open water communities, the producers have less bulk than consumers. but the energy they are storing and the passing on must be greater than that of the next level. Otherwise, the biomass that producer support could not be greater than that of the producer themselves. Very important, very important. This high energy flow is maintained by rapid turnover of individual plankton as already discussed rather than the increase in total mass. So you see in case of aquatic ecosystem, you see here phytoplankton, zooplankton, herring, but in the terrestrial, grasses, grasshopper, mice, snakes and so on. So they both are actually working in a different zone. They are working in a different way. Very important. I would say it's very crucial. Ecological and Eltonian pyramids. So the pyramid numbers can be both upright and inverted. Why? Because the pyramid of biomass can be both upright and inverted, but the pyramid of energy is always upright. So first, it is the pyramid of energy that is given here. It is the pyramid of biomass and it is pyramid of numbers. Now you see very clearly. Now in case of pyramid of numbers, you have tertiary consumers at the top, upright pyramid जो हम बोल रहे हैं. Then you have secondary consumers, you have primary consumers, you have producers. In case of pyramid of biomass, you see this is the producer, this is the primary consumers, this is secondary consumers, and you have tertiary consumers. In case of inverted one, you see primary, you have then you have producers, you have primary consumers, you have secondary consumers, you have tertiary consumers. And in case of energy pyramid also, you see you have the producers, primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers. So you just have to understand from which perspective we are looking into it and just divide it and that's all. So the flow in the ecosystem is very very important to see because the concept of energy is linked with whatever we have discussed till now. It will help you in geography also and it will help you in science and technology also. Energy is capacity to do work. Biological activities also require consumption of energy. Ultimately, it is coming from sun. Radiant energy of sun is transformed into chemical energy by the process of photosynthesis. This is stored in plant tissues and transformed into mechanical and heat form of energy during metabolic activities. We know this. In biological world, the energy flows from sun to plants and then to all heterotrophic organisms such as microorganisms, animals, and men in the following manner. We know this manner. Sun is a radiant energy. You have producers and then producers. Metabolism and heat energy is there. It is converting into heat energy and then chemical energy is consumers, decomposers and again heat energy. Heat energy is the common factor that you have to understand. Mechanical energy, it has two forms, kinetic or the free energy and potential energy. The energy of a body possessed by the virtue of its motion, we have read it in class 7th, it is kinetic energy and it is measured by the amount of work done in bringing the body at rest. How much energy is spent, that is kinetic energy. Potential energy is stored energy, that is energy at rest and becomes useful after conversion into kinetic energy. So there are examples of both running water, kinetic energy, and the stored water, potential energy. All organisms require a source of potential energy which is found in the chemical energy of food. So food is the means to transfer both matter and energy in living world. Plants synthesize food with the help of solar energy and inorganic substances such as nutrients, carbon dioxide, and water in a biochemical process called photosynthesis. We know that. So, six molecules of carbon dioxide and six molecules of hydrogen together they are forming 6cc6h12o6, that is glucose, and you have six molecules of oxygen. Solar energy enzyme, that is how the conversion is taking place. You must remember this very simple but fundamental equation. Units of energy, unit of measurement of energy is urge. All form of energy can be completely converted into heat energy theoretically for a better and uniform expression in ecology. Therefore, energy is measured not in terms of urge but in joules and units of heat. Heat, what is heat? Heat is measured in calories. 1 calorie is equal to the heat energy required to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water from 14.5 degrees centigrade to 15.5 degrees centigrade, and 1 calorie is equal to 4.2 joules or 4.2 into 10 raised to power 7 ergs. We have already read it in our class 7th and in basic concepts. Ecological energetics includes energy transformation occurs within the ecosystem. That means quantity of energy reaching an ecosystem per unit of area per unit of time. कुछ भी आप सोच सकते हैं. Quantity of energy trapped by green plants and converted into chemical form of energy. Quantity and the path of energy flowing from green plants to different organisms of different tropic levels over a period of time. So energetics is defined when we try to understand in a given unit area that what have been done and how much energy transformation is taking place. Solar radiations travel through space in the form of waves. Their wavelength ranging from 0.03 Armstrong to several kilometers. Green plants absorb strongly the blue and red light. 34% of the sunlight reaching Earth atmosphere is reflected back by the cloud and dust. 10% is held by ozone layer, water vapor and other atmospheric gases. 56% is reaching Earth's surface. Only a fraction of the energy reaching Earth's surface, that is 1 to 5%, is used by green plants for photosynthesis, and the rest is absorbed as heat by ground vegetation or water. So you just draw a kind of pie chart and you do divide it. In fact, only 0.02% of sunlight is reaching atmosphere uh, is used in the process of photosynthesis. The amount of radiant energy of all wavelengths that cross unit area per unit of time is called solar flux. So solar flux is about 8.368 joules. You know, that is how it is. At any given point in time, it is varying diurnally. That means day and night because of the Earth's rotation on its axis. So now examination is not going to ask you these technical figure of the solar flux, but if you know what is the solar flux is actually the amount of radiant energy of all wavelengths that cross unit area per unit of time. So this is all about understanding again how the energy is scattered, how the energy is being transformed. So when we are talking about the laws governing the energy transformation, when we see it from the ecosystem perspective, then let's see the first law of thermodynamics that we just said. That is conservation of energy. That is, energy may be transformed one form to another, but it neither can be destroyed nor can be created. It can only be changed from one form to another. That is the first law of thermodynamics. So in case of increase or decrease in the internal energy of the system itself, it is linked with work done and the heat that is either involved, that is absorbed, or you can say released. Thus the total amount of heat produced or absorbed in a chemical reaction, either occurring directly or in storage or in stages, I mean to say, it is always remaining same. Now this is called the specific law of constant heat sums. So decrease in the internal energy, that is change, that is theta. When we are delta, not theta, it's delta E is equal to work done by the system plus heat given off by the system. Here the delta is change in the quantity. Very simple. We have already said this. When the wood is burned, the potential energy present in the molecules of wood, it is equal to the kinetic energy released, and heat is evolved in the surroundings. You can see common burning process, and it is called exothermic reaction. But in endothermic reaction, the energy from the surroundings may be paid into a reaction. For example, in photosynthesis, the molecules of product store more energy than the reactants. That means it is having more energy than the beginning. So the extra energy is acquired from the sunlight. But then again, we cannot say there is a gain or loss. Only the sunlight is being transformed or changed into another form of energy. This is the first law of thermodynamics, where energy cannot be created or it is destroyed. It is only changing one form to another. Second law of thermodynamics, very important, it states that processes involving energy transformation will not occur spontaneously unless there is a degradation of energy from a non-random to random form. So example is man-made machines. Heat is the simplest and the most familiar medium of transfer of energy. But in biological system, it is not a useful medium of energy transfer, because as living systems are essentially isothermal, because there is no significant differences in the temperature between the different parts of a cell or in the different tissues or organs of a body. But in case of machine, like we are saying in man-made machines, you see how a furnace is working, how a steel furnace is working, or how machines are creating different kind of dyes and products and so on. Now let's see the concept of free energy, that is enthalpy and entropy also. So free energy is that component of total energy of a system which can do work under isothermal conditions. All physical and chemical processes proceed with a decline in free energy until they reach an equilibrium stage, where the free energy of the equilibrium is at the minimum, because the energy always tries to be at the balance or at the minimum level. So you have G is equal to H minus T and delta S, that is delta G, that is change in the free energy. This sign is the change. So you have the change in the free energy of a system, change in enthalpy, that is the change in the amount of energy in the form of heat liberated or absorbed by the system during physical or chemical changes, is called enthalpy. And minus, you have absolute temperature, and then you have entropy. The entropy is also showcasing change. Entropy is the name of a quantity in thermodynamics representing the degree of disorder in physical system, or the extent to which the energy in a system is available for doing work. That is called entropy. So the decline in free energy is accompanied by the increase in absolute temperature, or you can say the change in entropy. These are equal if there is no heat transfer between the system and surrounding, and if a reaction proceeds with a decline in free energy, we call it spontaneous. So if it is happening on its own, it is spontaneous. If it is we are putting external effort or energy, then it is not spontaneous. One more concept, I know it is getting a little complex, but one more last concept we have to understand. As Lindman pointed out, the amount of energy reaching each tropic level we discussed previously also, it is determined by the net primary production NPP, and the efficiency with food energy is converted into biomass. Okay, मान लिया चलिए. Of the light energy assimilated by plants, 50 to 70% is used for maintenance. Therefore, it is unavailable to consumers. We already said that most of herbivores and carnivores are more active than plants. We also agree with that. And they are spending correspondingly more of their assimilated energy on maintenance. We also agree with this. As a result, productivity of each tropic level is usually no more than 5 to 20% that of the level below it. The percentage transfer of energy from one tropic level to the next is called both the ecological efficiency and food chain efficiency. So that means as we are moving towards the topper level, as we are moving towards the predators or the tertiary level, there is more efficiency, and there is more what I should say swiftness, and more complexity. Maintenance cost of the secondary producers, 55 to 75% of the assimilated energy is spent on the maintenance. Temperature and moisture conditions of the habitat and the type of species, they are actually determining the maintenance cost. The drier and hotter the habitat, higher is the maintenance cost irrespective of the species. For example, the average maintenance cost of some Indian earthworm species is much more than what you see in case of the species which are there in colder climates. So the maintenance cost varies, and it is 3 times more in summer than in the winter thing. Now you can see why there are so many hotspots in India, why it is a mega diversity hotspot, and secondly why we say that in tropics you have so much diversity, why Amazon forest is so much crucial that it is called the lung of the earth. Assimilated energy and respiration energy, if we understand. Once we have eaten the food, energy is following a variety of path through the organism. So regardless of an organism's source of food, whatever it is digesting and absorbing, it is called assimilated energy क्योंकि वो अंदर चली गई. It is supporting maintenance, building tissues, or is excreted in unusable metabolic byproducts. Think of yourself. The energy used to fulfill metabolic needs, and most of the which is lost actually, the heat is known as respired energy. We have discussed in the beginning of the lecture also. A smaller fraction of assimilated energy is excreted in the form of organic nitrogen, or maybe containing waste, primarily ammonia, urea, uric acids, and produced when the diet contains an excess nitrogen. We know that for human beings also the same process is being followed. Similarly, when we are talking about ecological efficiency, it is the product of efficiencies at which the organism exploit their food resources and transform them into biomass, which becomes available to the next trophic level. That is why we say human being also most important and mindless consumers. They are actually hampering the whole ecosystem. Now you can appreciate that because the most biological production is consumed. Uh, Exploitation efficiency is 100%, and overall ecological efficiency depends upon different factors like proportion of the assimilated energy incorporated in growth, storage, and reproduction. So the first proportion is called assimilation efficiency. As we said, कितना आप खाते हैं, कैसे आप minimum में maximum करते हैं. And the second is called net production efficiency. So the product of assimilation and the net production efficiency is the gross production efficiency. Obviously शुरू में हमने बात की थी. Apart from inspiration, whatever is remaining, that is going further. So the proportion of food energy that is transformed into consumer biomass energy is the key for the sustenance of the ecosystem. So you can just relax and just have a look at this, because these are not going to come up directly, but if you know the terms, that is more than fine, and it will be very easier for you even to take up some examples when you Google and do certain kind of research. Thank you very much for being there and for understanding such complex concepts. I hope you are able to understand them in a simple manner, and We do look, looking forward to any concepts which you are not able to understand. You can just write back to me. And those who are working with us, they must make their own notes, try to make their own diagrammatic representations with examples, which I'm going to check up in our personal mentorship sessions. Thank you very much and see you in the next session.